Yes, it's 2 o'clock Indian time, and we are live now on the YouTube channel. So good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to all the speakers and moderators on the panel. So today is the high performance training day of the webinar. So I welcome you all on behalf of the president of the IASM, on behalf of the Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine. And without further ado, let's go to the moderator of the day, Andrew Gregg from South Africa, to moderate the session, as well as he has a topic to deliver today. So over to Andrew. Hi, Andrew. And
thank you very much.
Professor Mahendran to introduce Andrew to the audience and the co-speakers. Professor Mahin, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I'm talking to myself. So sorry. Thank you, Dr. Prof. Tiaga. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to viewers. Today we have a very good session on the high performance topics discussed by three excellent speakers. I think Andrew need no introduction. He have known the IASM and the MASM people now many times. He have given us a good presentation. Today he's going to talk a very specific high performance sciences for coaches. Andrew, I will give it to you. The ball in your court now.
Thank you very much, Prof. Let me just share my screen.
Yes, please.
Just got to get there. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Is it up?
Yes.
If somebody can just give me a heads up. Okay. So firstly, I'd just like to say thank you very much for affording me the opportunity. Talking on performance in sport is a wonderful opportunity for all of us, I think. And I look at the CVs of my fellow colleagues, and I'm excited to hear some of their talks as well. And hopefully my talk can add a little bit to what they're going to say as well. So, I mean, I think it's important just to give you some sort of context and background as to where I come from. I've been in the sport industry for the last 25 to 30 years, both as a conditioning expert as well as with in a rehabilitation setting. And I'm fortunate enough to travel around with a couple of our South African national teams into various parts of the world, Europe, America, Asia, and such like. And I've been able to get a wealth of experience. And the one thing I think that I have to say is that every country that I go into, it's unique. When we talk about performance or the sporting performance of every country, there's a unique set of criteria that seems to make it relevant for that particular sport. And I think sometimes that's what makes it very difficult for us to talk in a webinar like this, where I'll bring my experience, my fellow colleagues will bring experience from Malaysia, other colleagues will bring experience from other parts of the world, and we try and combine it into one scenario. And I think very often that's very difficult to try and do. But be that as it may, I want to try and sort of press on a little bit today. So I think what's very, very important, and this has come out in a study that was recently completed at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, where they looked at cricket, in particularly cricket in this country, and they realized that in order to perform well, in order to have a high level of performance as a team, as a national association, there were various mechanisms that we had to get right that aimed towards that. So you have to have personal responsibility as an individual, and that's probably where it starts. Your team environment has to be there, the sporting environment, the social environment, and the macro environment all have to be aligned, to be talking the same language, to be after the same goals, to be looking at the same set of criteria in order to improve performance. And certainly in my experience, that's not always the case. Politics always comes a role. There's regionalism, there's favoritism from certain states or certain areas when you're choosing national sides. But even within smaller areas like clubs or schools, depending on where you're coaching, you might find that your philosophy of coaching, your team environment, may not be exactly the same as what the school is wanting or what the parents are wanting. And I think if we're going to have consistent success from a performance point of view, all of these need to align. And at a whole lot of the successful teams like a Barcelona from a footballing perspective, we realized that those environments, the macro environments, the social environments, and all the small environments are all actually aligned, and they're all looking for the same things. So today I want to just identify a concern or potentially a theory that has been put out there by Dr. John Orchard. And he says that there's a hypothetical relationship that exists between training, and I need to differentiate here between under-training and over-training. And I think that's hopefully one of the take-home messages from today: injury, fitness, and performance. And I think what's important here is he doesn't see that as being totally separate. So we play an impact into performance. One comes from coaching science, one is from exercise science, and one is medical science. And I think here again, you know, if you had to really look at this visually, you could see that potentially medical science, just by the size of that cog that's there, that medical science at the moment seems to be playing a much bigger role in terms of exercise performance and sport performance than potentially exercise science and coaching science does. But again, I would suggest that per sport that would differ. And then even within a region that would differ as to how much medical science could then play an impact. So from a coaching perspective, we understand that there are various ways of learning and various understandings that we have of space. We talk about pattern versus recall. What we do realize and understand that those teams that consistently perform better practice what they call a patterned response or a patterned approach to training. So what they do is they play pattern, they practice pattern, not just performance. They don't just worry about the outcome of what it is, whether you score a goal or whether you hit the ball. They actually talk more about the pattern of the sequencing of events that lead to that position. And we see from a coaching science, we focus on the process as opposed to the outcome, where that's the most successful forms. We then also look at something called game-based approaching, and I have given some indication of this in a talk that I gave. We talk about game-based approaching, chunk information for the athletes, which makes it more digestible, it makes it easier to understand, and it allows our athletes to break down movements or components of movements or patterns of movements into bite-sized chunks. And what we see in that as well, and it'll come out through later on in my talk, how important that becomes from a learning perspective. We can't throw a young junior athlete into an area where they're using a game-based approach immediately because they haven't had the basics, they haven't had the skills and opportunities to learn the correct movement patterns. So there we go. So there's a hypothetical relationship that does exist between training, both under and overtraining, injury, fitness, and performance. And that revolves around those sciences, the coaching science, the medical science, and the sports science. So if
Andrew, sorry for interruption, Andrew. Your connection seems to be a little bit lagging. So could you do something about it to increase the Wi-Fi connectivity? Your
I'm not
voice,
sure if I can.
Yeah, your voice starts breaking in between. So if you could probably move closer to the modem or the router.
Okay, so just hold on. Is it better if I'm here? Sorry, I'm just going to move around.
Yeah, we'll see how it comes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So if we look at the relationship between training and performance, we've also got to understand that there is a relationship between overtraining and undertraining. And that very often leads to a risk of injury or reduction in fitness or a poor team performance. And I think what is important here, especially for the trainers and the coaches out there, that too much training is bad, but similarly, too little training is also bad. And the idea is that we've got to try and hit the sweet spot. So we've got to try and hit that area of our training relationship where all things are aligned. So performance of an athlete is determined by the difference between fatigue and fitness. And how many times do those of us that are working in a strength and conditioning environment not have to worry about being tired and not getting athletes to the competition where they're tired? Certainly in my response, in my relationships with the teams that I've had, both in football and cricket, It's a very fine line as to being well conditioned, well prepared for an event, or getting there and you're just slightly tired. So the sweet spot for the coaches is where the training stimulus maximizes the net performance and having an appropriate training load while limiting the negative factors of training. And this is a concept that I've also brought up in other talks, where we talk about training as a poison. So if you take medication as an example, medication can either be a good thing if taken in the right doses, a very bad thing if you take it in too bigger doses, and not really effective at all if you take it in too smaller doses. And I think that's what training is as well. So if we have too much training, it leads to a negative impact, which will increase the risk of injury. It increases fatigue. We know that there's a relationship between injury, fatigue, and illness, as well as overtraining, and obviously a drop-off in performance. So when we look to try and measure loads and identify what these loads are, we've got two types. One, we've got an external load, and the new GPS monitors, these new handheld devices are helping us a lot in that. There are also systems of managing and monitoring, AMS system, athlete monitoring systems out there that assist us in managing or monitoring the external loads. So whether we use GPS, whether we're doing speed and distance, whether we are doing annotation of games, catches, jumps, runs, fatigue indexes, etc., those give us an idea of the external loads. But probably where the important ones lie on an individual basis are the internal loads. And these are physiological or perceptual responses. And this is where trying to create a methodology for performance becomes very, very difficult, because we realize that there's a very subjective rating as to where our loads are. So any person can have the same external load, that same physiological load, but internally, the internal load, depending on their environment, depending on their circumstances, may change. Right. Obviously, an increase in both the external and internal workload results in a potentially higher risk of injury. So what we do when we look at this workload, we've come up with a concept of acute versus chronic. And an acute versus chronic workload is something that we can work with. And in that space, an acute workload would be of short duration. It can be on a session-by-session basis, or as a trainer, we can delineate that it's only for a certain period of time. In this case, so in my experience, if my teams are competing every weekend, the acute performance or the acute work is overly the rolling 3 to 6 weeks worth of training, ratio of less than 1, acute to chronic, you're in the sweet spot. In other words, your risk of injury, your risk of fatigue, your amount of training that you're doing is in the sweet spot. If you're moving more towards the right, your acute to chronic work ratio is higher than 1, and so you're increasing your risk. And we generally find there's a drop-off in performance the further to the right of this graph that we go. Right, what we do also need to understand, though, is that there is a very positive relationship between training load and injury training, but it also is protective. And I think that becomes important, because what we do find is that we get the most protection from injury from high intensity training workloads. And again, this is something that we've seen during this COVID time, where a lot of our athletes aren't being trained by professionals. They're going onto YouTube, they're going onto Instagram, they're looking and they're downloading information, but they're not relating it into a general program, and they're not trying to periodize it specifically what they do. So what they do is they get involved in high intensity workloads, but they do them repetitively. Now, a high intensity workload, if structured correctly within the program, has a protective benefit, and it leads to a Friday. We then see that this doesn't occur and it becomes a negative. We do also see that the increased physical adaptations from hard training are also associated with a lower risk of injury. And I think these become vitally important. All right, so if we look at performance, and again, for those of you that are involved in any type of sport, you can apply this to anything. Basically, there is a stimulus which you've got to perceive. There's a response, a decision that the person has to make, and part of that response is an action plan. And what we see in skilled performance is that the timing of this is then changed. So if we go back to that slide, we see that from the time that you perceive something to the time that you act becomes vitally important. So what researchers have gone out and done is they've looked, And they've identified three. Okay, the first one is maximum certainty. The second one is to be able to conserve energy. And the third one is to reduce time taken to achieve the goal. So when we talk about maximum certainty, it perform an event, you perform a specific skill in a sport, you are certain of the outcome and you're certain of exactly how to complete it. And we find that those people that don't have that tentative nature, that just try things, are generally going to be more successful than those that don't. When we look at conservation of energy, we then say, well, the better athletes out there, the higher performing athletes are those athletes that are able to conserve as much energy as possible, but still create the desired response. And that becomes vitally important. I think the psychologists often talk about this as being flow. They talk about flow. So when you look at the elite athletes of the world, they seem to have this flow. You look at the football teams and the cricket sides that perform well consistently. It just seems to happen. But when you look at them, they're conserving energy because they know where to move. They know the patterns of movement that should be going on. And the last one is a reduction in time to achieve the goal. So when we look at skill performance, we always seem to say, sure, that person looks like they've got so much more time on the ball, or they've got so much time to think and to react. And what happens now is that we see that in these skill performances, these are the three things that mix together. And I think it becomes important to understand that this can actually be trained. And it has to be trained in a certain pattern, because if you're skipping one of the stages, or if you're not allowing an athlete to get their ability to consolidate and get their movements right and to become efficient, you can't then ask them to perform that movement quickly, because then they're going to be all over the show and they're not going to be doing it properly. So what I want to do now is I just want to indicate here, from a coaching from performance point of view, there are various stages that we can go through, and I'm adapting this from a medical model, almost from a rehabilitation setting, but there's enough science behind this to indicate that this is the way that we learn from a skill perspective and a performance point of view. So when we talk about the cognitive stage is very much internally based. It's, do I understand the movements? Can I see the movements? Can I repeat the movements? And what we see here is we see a lot of errors. So this is an opportunity where individuals are shown a particular skill and they get an opportunity to complete that skill over and over and over again. And this is where a lot of coaching takes place, because in this area, the skill needs to be performed very slowly, because what they need to do is they need to get competence within the movement. All right. And it's competence within the movement, because remember, these athletes do not have the kinesthetic awareness. They don't have the ability to internally reflect and to identify what they're doing right or wrong. So it's a lot of the input here and the feedback is external. So what we say here is that if you have athletes or if you have players that are in the stage, what we have is we need to demonstrate a lot. And it's active demonstration, and it includes both visual and the mental picture, because these athletes don't have a mental picture for themselves. So what we've got to do is we've got to help build them. So we often talk about a tell, show, do method. So you tell them what you want them to do. You use the right words. You then show them what you want them to do. And then the athlete gets to do the actual event or actual practice or the skill. All right. And you have to allow for time and practice of demonstrating the skill. The important thing at this stage is not to overload the athlete. And this is what we see a lot of, especially in some of the ball sports like soccer, potentially like hockey, whereas if we're teaching them a certain skill, what we end up doing is we end up overloading the athlete by adding too many variables. We either add an opposition player, we put it into a game, and they haven't really developed the skill yet. And I think it's important that when we talk about performance, we just get that right. We allow the athletes the ability to improve that skill set. As they move down this chain, we then move into something called the associative stage. And the associative stage now is where the athletes are starting to understand the movement. They're getting it right 70, 80% of the time, but they're still not getting it right all the time. And this is a stage which is very exciting for me, because this is when we can start adding other areas into it or other factors into it. All right. So this is also when we see that performance is starting to improve, because the athlete has the understanding, they have the groundwork of what should be happening, they have the movement pattern. Now they're learning to apply that movement pattern into different areas and in different ways. So they can refine the accuracy and the consistency of the motor skill. So this is where the ball might bounce a little higher, it might be kicked to them a little bit harder, a little bit softer, it might come with the bounce. etc., etc. There's certainly a reduced amount of error, and the performer becomes gradually more successful and fluent. And again, I think it's this fluency that we talk about. Also at the same time is that these players, these learners start to get feedback. They start to get this internal mechanism of feedback so that they can start judging for themselves. Yes, that felt right. No, that didn't feel right. So the implications for practice here are that this stage is generally longer than the cognitive stage, because the cognitive stage is about generally teaching the basic skill. This stage starts with the mastery of the skill in different environments. So we see that the actions get smoother, they're more accurate, they're better timed, and they're definitely becoming more efficient, which is wonderful to see. And what we can do here is we can use more complex and more detailed cues. So here we can start building, we can almost start stacking the environment to start including other avenues to make sure that that person gets that ability to control things and to reduce the time taken to achieve the outcome. So when we ultimately look at the autonomous phase, and I think it's important here that the majority of our athletes do, and certainly if you're at a national or international level, excuse me, we do see that our athletes reach this stage, but the sequencing and the timing of these routines is automatic. And again, we see that happening in a lot of the sports that we watch on television, where the movements that the athletes do seems to be just automatic to them. And I think what's important for me to get across today is that through this process of cognitive to associative to the autonomous stage, we can actually train athletes to become automatic in their movement patterns, especially if we sequence them correctly. And I'm absolutely, I've been doing this for the last 20 years, as I said, and even from a strength and conditioning perspective, if we're wanting an athlete to be strong on the field, we can condition them over various stages, over a number of periods, to become conditioned so that the movements that we're asking them to do in sport are more reliable, they happen quicker, and they happen with more certainty. All right. A very, very important aspect here is that the performer is also able to analyze their own performance and adjust their own actions. And I think this is vital. I've been having a couple of conversations with a young man called Paddy Upton, who used to be involved in India with the cricket side. He's more of a mental coach, but he certainly says that a large part of his work is to create internal feedback from a psychological point of view for his athletes. And I think we can do that physically as well. And I think it's something that as trainers, we need to adapt, and as coaches, we need to adapt into our coaching and training styles to try and get the athletes to identify, was that movement, did I execute that movement correctly? Or did it feel good? Did it feel right? How does it feel compared to others, what I've felt before? All right, so in this stage, if we do reach there, we do have high levels of smoothness and efficiency and accuracy as performed without stress. And I think the efficiency is what becomes vitally important. If any of you have ever tried to swim, or you've gone into a pool and you've done a couple of lengths, you'll realize that we're very efficient. Without being in water and without being water-based, we've lost that efficiency in water. And one of the first things that we get is you understand that locomotor respiratory coupling, where you learn to breathe at the same time as your upper body is moving. And it's not because you're fitter or stronger, but you just become more efficient. Your body gets used to that efficiency. So that, in my mind, is a very clear way of how that can play out in sport. So I think one of the things that I mentioned right at the beginning of my talk was that when we look, because of the internal mechanisms and the internal loads that we have in our own bodies and with various cultures around the world, what we must say is that any model for performance has to be unique. And again, when we look at the things that I've mentioned on the slide about training, injury, and training demand and periodization, within your own environment, within the culture that you're working within, each one of those may be bigger or smaller than another one. Each one of those may be slightly more important than another. So to give you an example, I've done quite a bit of traveling into India, and I've often looked at trying to bring the principles and the models of performance that I've developed in a South African sense, and I'm trying to place them into India. And the reality is you can't. The Indian environment is totally different. The Indian athlete is totally different. I'm not saying they're better or worse, they're just different. They can have excellent performance, but the reasons why they perform better are different to why a South African athlete would differ. So I would strongly
Andrew? Are you with us, Andrew? Hello, Andrew?
encourage all of us out there not to take models that are based in other parts of the world. I would say let's look at our own environments. Let's create models of performance that are unique to our environments and unique to our cultures, because those are the ones that are going to be.
Bye-bye. We missed Andrew.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hi, sorry, I bumped off there for a minute. I don't know what happened.
Right.
Something dropped my Wi-Fi.
I thought you are taking another flight.
No, I'm not flying anywhere. I'm right here.
Okay.
Right here.
Good, good.
Are there any questions?
You haven't finished yet.
Does anybody have any questions for me?
Done yet.
Sorry, I don't know. Nobody commented, so I had finished my slideshow.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's the last slide that you're unique of a model performance, yeah?
Yeah, that was it. That was the last one.
Okay. I don't have.
So we can ask now Janani, who's moderating the questions.
Questions. Okay.
Dr. Janani, could you please project the questions? Yes.
Hold on, Andrew. Yeah. So Andrew, you have 3 questions there. Andrew?
The first question is, what kind of periodization principle do you follow in your practice? So, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you.
So, what kind of periodization principle do you follow in your practice? Undulating periodization model, where we deal with in an undulating way. It just works better for me. I never have athletes for a 6-month period before a season starts. So I don't like that gradual build-up. I'm very much about the specificity of movements. So I like to combine different training methodologies within certain time periods. So my model is more of an undulating, randomized, periodized model. Again, that just suits my environment because I don't get athletes for long periods of time without their business starts, and then we start moving into that to do long, slow stuff. So we start really. So that's the one: technical versus tactical training in injury prevention. Very interesting question. The research will tell us that from a rehabilitation setting, physical strength plays a very small part of it. The best part of any form of rehabilitation is actually taking the athlete onto the field again and doing neuromuscular training. And the neuromuscular training comes from tactical work or technical drills. I'm not quite sure what the differentiation is between technical and tactical, but certainly getting the individual to complete the movements on a field that happen needs of movement, and it's multi-directional.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Certainly from a rehabilitation setting, I spend probably 7 combined movements. I'm trying to complete movements because not just to rehabilitate a specific joint or from a. The last question is heart rate. Both, to be honest. Heart rate will be an external one that you can measure from externally, but RP is one that you work internally. And again, for me, it depends on the athlete. I know that they, on a particular day, their mindset might not be up to the level of training that I want them to do. So then they need me to be the motivator, and I need to encourage them to do that. Similarly, there are other athletes and other times where their heart rate is going to give me the response that I need. I want them to keep their heart rates low, and athletes to train lower. They always want to go out there and they want to sweat and they want to work really hard. No athlete just wants to do sort of that base, that slow metabolic type of training, which is just good for different areas, different reasons. But they all just want to go out there. So I would use both. Again, I don't think there's one is better than the other. I think they're used in different circumstances and at different times. So hopefully that answers the questions.
Yes, that's all, I think, the questions. I don't think so. Any other question?
We have a poll question now.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah. So this is the poll question for the session. Intensity is more important than duration of training for better adaptations. So this controversial question is now open for people to vote. Let's see how many vote for and against it. So while people keep voting, yeah.
Wow.
Sudden splurge of votings. Let's wait for a few more seconds before we go for the result. Okay.
Yep.
So let's share the results here. So Andrew, your thoughts on this?
Funnily enough, I did one of my studies at university was on intensity. It was in cyclists. And I can almost say with 100% certainty that intensity trumps everything else. From a training perspective or from a detraining perspective, if you can maintain intensity for one session a week, you can maintain your gains, you can maintain your strength and your cardiovascular fitness a lot longer than if you just try to maintain the duration.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your lovely session. We'll probably go for the next speaker. Andrew, if you could please try to improve your internet connection somehow. We are still losing your voice in between, and probably Professor Mahen can take over from you for a few minutes for introducing the next speaker and the next session. And you can be back with us with a better broadband. Yes, Professor Mahin, please take over and.
If you could, let me.
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can make a plan here. Yes, definitely.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. I think we had a very good presentation from Andrew to talk about the overall science and how is it impact. The next speaker is going to be talking about the impact of the COVID and how we will return to play, return to training, return to competition. That's where I think after Andrews and the follow-up by Dr. Associate Professor Dr. Raja Mohammed Raja Firhat, Raja Mohammed Firhat Raja Zidane. I always call him Firhat Pate, and that's how we address him. He's a Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, and he is the academic Deputy Dean and a good friend of mine, and he have extensive work and done in the biomechanics and high performance competition works. Without a further ado, let me introduce Associate Professor Dr. Raja Mohammed Firhat Raja Zidane with the title of COVID-19, safe to return to training and competition. And he's the head of the Sports Science and Performance UITM-FC. If you see the logo behind up there with the two lions, that is his strong point of the UITM Football Club. Pete, the ball in your court.
Okay, can you hear me, Dr. Mahan?
Yes, please. Yes.
All right.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mahendran. So I'm Raja Muhammad Firhat bin Raja Azidin. I'm from UITM. Today, I just would like to share some of the insights of COVID-19, safe return to training and competition. So since COVID-19, there is a lot of issues and challenges. So some of these challenges may have some detrimental effects on the athletes and the coaches themselves. When you talk about, once the COVID-19 started, I think in Malaysia back in March 2020, so there's a lot of sporting events and also leagues, major leagues has been either postponed or cancelled. So some of these challenges which may have some effect on these athletes and also these coaches are related with modified or condensed pre-season schedule. So it's because since it's been cancelled or it's been most of the event has been cancelled or either postponed, so you're going to have a very condensed schedules in terms of matches. You talk about athletes who are coming back for training, which are deconditioning state, and you have a mixed level of preparation among these players. So when you want to design program, some of the program doesn't suit everybody, so you may have some individualized program which may help them to enhance the performance. When you talk about some of the challenges related with an increased risk of injuries or over trainings, some players also will come back with an adverse weight gain or even weight loss, especially the muscle loss, and the changes in their body compositions. So, and at the same time, some of the injured athletes may have some interaction, interrupted progress with their rehabilitation programs. And I think one of the most challenging aspects is when we talk about the facilities and the program challenge. I think this is where I think if most sports institutions, sports clubs, or even any sporting team may have to readjust or modify their some of the standard operation procedures to ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic would be under control. I think in Malaysia, we are doing quite well in containing the COVID-19. Our government have did a lot of good jobs in to ensure that the numbers of COVID-19 infection is low. And when we talk about how we're going to progress, then I'm going to share some of our approaches. So based on my football clubs, this is UITM FC. So we played in the Super League, but our players is mainly consists of students, athletes. So this is some of our approach towards the COVID-19 return to training. So this is where we are during the, this is where we started off before the COVID-19. We are in the competition phase. So, we have been playing around 3 weeks before the COVID-19 pandemic started. So since we are in the competition phase, so these training programs is the way we normally train every week. We have 1 game a week, and then we have 2 days for recovery. We have some acquisition days, and also we have 1 day recovery before game. So during that time, coaches have, I think, 2 choices. So whether you can convert that into a transition phase so that you don't have to train much, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, or you can maintain the same competition phase that you have been doing it before the COVID-19 pandemic happened. So when you talk about this kind of program, so means that if everyone is there, we normally have a strength training program. So since these players are at home doing their individual stuff, so the training programs are tailor-made to ensure that they will hit the strength training programs, the endurance and speed activation, which is similar to the competition phase. But only the problem is when the players are at home, there's a lot of challenges where normally they don't have the facilities. It is in very confined space. So, and in fact, the monitoring are likely to be quite difficult. So Normally what we did is we have our home-based exercise program that we give to these players, and not only we monitor them using virtual monitoring, we give them videos, manual instruction, so that they will be able to exercise regularly at home. Okay. At the same time, during the COVID-19, the home-based exercise also will include exercises which involve the equipment that they normally use. For example, if they are footballers, definitely the drills should be done using a football. Now some of these drills is very specific towards the demand of football, and also it has to ensure that the level of intensity are likely to be similar-ish to actual match play. So it's going to be quite difficult to do a training program which is similar to match play simulation. So definitely, so there's a lot of match simulation protocol exists. If you look at the literatures, you know, one of the match simulation, what we call the overground match simulation protocol. So this is developed by my research group, involving high acceleration and deceleration multi-direction movement. You can perform it, this is either like 45 minutes to 90 minutes, a full match simulation. It does have a similar physiological and also mechanical loading, which is similar to actual match play. The only difference with these simulations is that it does not involve any soccer-specific movement involving the ball, like a passing, heading, or even shooting. So this is some of the papers that we produced in the past to explain further on how the match simulation were performed. So you can look at these two papers. At the same time, we also developed a few other match simulation, what we call the high intensity exercise protocol, using a more high intensity, more high acceleration and deceleration with multi-directional movement protocol. And also recently we have developed a new youth soccer match simulation, mainly for youth. And this simulation, we involve some movement related with soccer specific, which if they have a heading, they have passing, and they also have shooting. So you can use this kind of match simulation as part of your training program, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's some issues related with the Bundesliga blueprint, the early lesson from the return of German football. So you see, when Germany start to open their football league, the players and the teams only have around 70 days to prepare themselves for the match. So based on some of the studies, it indicates that more than 50% players would cover the same match system, similar to pre-COVID-19. And even there's a similar, about 56% of these players maintain their pre-lockout sprinting volume. So in terms of physical demand, so 50% of more than 50% of the players really match those demand. But however, you can see there's around more than 200% of injuries rates per game has been observed. So although in the league, they already have changed the regulation to ensure that they can do like 5 substitution per game. So even with highest substitution, they also seen a very high increment of injuries per game. So this is where we need to program ourselves and also program some of the training program to ensure that we will minimize the risk of injuries. So, and because the Malaysian League will start somewhere in August, I think this month, and the 26th. So we have been training for the past 6 weeks. So we have time actually to prepare themselves, to prepare our players to ensure they are going to be in a peak condition before the league started. So if you look at some of the COVID-19 return to training, so how we can minimize the risk. So this is some of our approaches. So number one is most important, that you have to adhere social gathering and physical policies. So this is based on the local and state and federal authorities. So this is very important. What you don't want is, in Malaysia, if you are caught not wearing a mask when you are in public, so you cannot get fined. In the early stage of our movement control order, so if you go out without any authorities or without any permissions, you can get fined. Or some of your severe cases that you can get into a lockup. So it's very important, you know, whatever social gathering and physical policies according to the local and state federalities you need to follow. So what you don't want is your players to be fined or your players to be locked in the police station. So it's going to be bad. Before we start training, or before the once the government have gave the permission for football clubs to start training, so we did a COVID-19 swab test for all players, coaches, and even officials. So everybody involved with the team, they need to perform a swab test. So even before training, they will check the body temperature and also symptoms. So ensure that all participants are symptom-free and they have a good body temperature. So if they are deemed to be have a fever, for example, if they are coughing, they have flu, so they are not allowed to train on that particular day. So they have to wear a face mask before and after training, not during training, but before and after training. When they come, when they start to come to the field, they need to wear the mask. Okay. And we also promote hand washing and sanitizing before and after workout. So we have to ensure that this the hand sanitizer is readily available for this player during the early stage of the training. So we avoid training in large group. So we have the regulation means that the players can only be trained less than 10 players and only 4 coaches per session. So that in Malaysia, that regulations is for around a month. And then over time, they will increase the numbers of players and coaches. So this is where how we first start to control the numbers of players and also coaches. So and you limit and staggered training groups and or alternate training days. This is also very important. So sometimes if you train, for example, 3 times, you have 5 days training, you can train 3 times a week. You can do it alternate days. Another 2 days you can do it online. So this is another way you can minimize the risk of COVID-19 infection. I think this is very also important to minimize risk with allowing for extra time between session. I think if you train like less than 10 players per session, so the next group will come in. So before the next group will come in, definitely you have some extra time for cleaning the surface and also the equipment. This is very important. So you need to sanitize the equipment and also the surfaces before the next group will come in. Physical distancing or social distancing during training should be addressed. I think it's more than 3 meters. It's very important. You know, 1 meter would not be a very good space distance. So in Malaysia, for any dynamic task movement, it has to be more than 3 meters. In the early stage, there is no non-contact between players were allowed. But after around 4 weeks of training, so the government have allowed us to have a contact training for whole clubs and also any sports teams. So most of the time, the players would not use the changing room. The changing room is closed, so they will come in with their own sports attire. And once the training finish, so they will leave their venues immediately. So there's no social talking to the other players, so less contact and also less interaction between players. If they're training in the gym, so sometimes we take the gym outside. So we use outdoor training spaces wherever possible. So, and even if you train in the gym, we keep outdoor prop open and light throughout the days. It's very important so that it will have a good ventilation. We maximize fresh air flows with a relative humidity of 60%. That is recommended by the National Strength and Conditioning Association. We use exercise pairing to limit weight room traffic. So normally the players would come into a one-way traffic flow based on entrance and exit. So if they come in one entrance, so they come out with a different exits. So, and they also will avoid person-to-person contact while spotting. So this is some of the method that we use to minimize the risk. So if you look at some of the training safety, the risk factors following periods of interactivity, the CSCC and National Strength Conditioning has come up with a joint consensus guidelines for training, for return to training. So based on these guidelines, it states that if you are starting off with training after inactivity, so for the first week you should start only with a 50% of the total volume. So they call it this 50-30-20-10 rule. So this recommendation enables coaches and athletes to ensure they have a very good rate of progression before they can start to train in a very high intensity. So the second week is 70%, and some of the players, if they are adapting well, they can start to train 100% during the third week. Okay, this is based on individual. I think this is very important because some of these players, when they come back, you have a different level of fitness and conditioning. So players who is a little bit adapt very well, so they can start at 100% during the week 3. But for our team, now most of us would do the 100% after the week 4. So week 5. So even if you want to start to do some fitness assessment, you can do it at around week 5. That is how we did our program. And during the early stage, if you want to see some of the fitness level of these players, now you may want to do some sub-maximal level kind of exercise on a testing protocols. In the first week, we only did the body composition test. So we using the BIA so that we be able to know whether these players have increment in body composition or not. Okay, so this is some of our tests. Even we did the first week of BIA. After the 4th week, we did some maximal vertical jump. During the test also, we ensure that these players and also coaches would address the social distancing. If you look, we perform our single leg vertical jump test to ensure that we have some information related with bilateral imbalances. It's very important for these players. We also perform some yo-yo tests and also the 30-meter sprint. So some players who is good, they can perform their yo-yo test and endurance level 2 in maybe level 19, for example. So we compare those data with the data that we collected earlier during the preseason. So even if the 20-meter sprint, the 30-meter sprint, players are required to perform the task within less than 4 seconds. So if they can do it, then it's good. If they cannot, that's the job of the fitness coach to ensure that they will get the numbers right. Okay. If they have time, this is normally the other test that we normally did during the preseason. We did the isokinetic test, the functional HQ ratio. We did the stabilometer test to ensure the anterior, posterior, and medial lateral imbalances if observed. And we also did the landing error scoring system. So this exercise and these test protocols enable us to understand better about the risk of injuries of these players. Some of the information related to our test is we already published this elsewhere, so you can look at some of the papers that I've presented here in this slide. So when we talk about another risk factors following periods of inactivities, so you should avoid high volume and maximal access to fatigue, and also perform within a limited time frame. So that's very important. So during the early stage, try to avoid exercise to fatigue. You should start also with 10 to 20 minutes of daily dynamic warm-up and re-establish sports-related movement patterns. So if you are playing football, so your warm-up also should also include the ball as well. If you're playing badminton, so make sure that the warm-up also will include the racket. If you play rugby, for example, it's also important so that those kind of warm-up really establishes sport-related movement patterns. Okay, and always consider when you have a very long, prolonged inactivity, that would also increase the likelihood of delay onset muscle soreness, which we call the DOMS. So you need to be properly recovered. So means that, but during this stage, ice bath is likely to be quite difficult because you cannot get everybody to do the ice bath. So you can recommend these players to do their own ice bath. You can do foam rollers as part of the recovery routine. you should also communicate regularly with the medical and coaching staff about the risk athletes, especially athletes who have some imbalances in their muscles, athletes who have some other markers of injuries, for example, the way they land, improper landing mechanics, athletes who has some symptom in the past of being not regulated during heat, for example. So you need to ensure that you know who is this athlete, who is this at-risk athlete. Okay, and you have to plan and adjust workup to match environmental factors. So if you most of the time, if your competition or your tournament is in the afternoon, so you work out in the afternoon more because it does match the environmental factors. You do not perform physically exhausting exercise. So just because of mental toughness you want to develop, so you have these exhausting drills should not be performed, especially during the early stage of your training program. And you consider the use of pre-screening, readiness surveys, and workout monitoring. So this is some of the examples. So we use a wellness score, readiness to train, for these players. So we monitor them every single day to ensure that we know that they are ready to train. So this is a wellness score where we have we observe their fatigue levels, sleep quality, muscle soreness, stress, and also mood. So we use Google Doc approaches. So we send them a link. They can, every morning they wake up, they just look at on the phone, they just press the link and they will fill up this. So it is automatically done, and it's quite easy for us to monitor their readiness to train every single day. And we can also measure their sleep quality. So there's an apps we call the sleep cycle apps. It's free and it's quite handy, and just use the handphone. You can have some information related with sleep quality, so that you know that these players are likely to have a better sleep quality, or if they have some issues related with sleep, you can start to intervene. Okay, this is some other training load monitoring that we use. We use the subjective rating RPE scale. This is based on every single during one session. So every single component of the session, we take the RPE and we divide it by the time of the training, and then we can determine whether if the arbitrary unit is likely to be higher. If they have like more than 4,500 AU a week, so they are at risk of injuries. And you can also look at the acute chronic workload ratio. So this is another way to look at injury risk or fatigue among these players. So there's a certain calculation. You can get it online. I think this is quite easy. And because you only use the RPE scale to understand these players, but you have to make sure that these players really understand how to use the RPE scale. For us, it is a very good tools to have, so that we can understand these players better. And even if you have the GPS, I think there's another way for you to look at the training load of every training session. So you can look at the total distance, you can look at high intensity running, and also the total body load. So you have some information related to how these players are likely to be, whether these players are having a good physical demand during that particular session. Okay, when we talk about the competition, we use a 1 match per week preparation for these players. Means that after a game, they're going to be a 2-day recovery. And these 3 days, we emphasize on strength training, endurance, and also speed. Before 1 day before the games, we do another recovery. So just activation exercises. So this is a normal routine for most of the professional clubs in the world. If you have 2 days per week kind of matches, so you may have some 2 days of recovery before you prepare for the next game, and then you have another 3 days to pre-activate these players so that they will be able to peak during those particular match. During competitions, so this is normally, we have a friendly match. We have started to do friendly matches. So players, when they came to the stadium, so they need to register themselves, and they have to make sure that they check their body temperature. At the same time, only coaches are allowed to be in the benches. The reserve players will be sitting on the ground on the stand. So these are kind of the standard operation procedures. So when we start our league, I think in 26th of August. So these are the standard operation procedure which need to be addressed in every single match. I think this is similar to what the other FIFA major leagues in the world. So thank you very much and terima kasih.
Thank you. Andrew, are you okay?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes, I'm hopefully my Wi-Fi is better now, so hopefully everybody can hear me.
Right.
I'm not sure if it is. So I'm going to ask Dr. Janini if she can just put up some questions. Thank you very much for a wonderful talk. Certainly, there's lots of very valuable information, and it's nice to see that we are actually talking along the same lines, despite being millions of miles apart.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting for Dr. Janini to just put up questions.
You have to stop sharing, please. Okay, good. Dr. Janini?
Professor Fahad, you have to go to the top of your screen, and then there's a little green thing there. You got to, or a red thing, and say stop sharing.
Okay. Yep.
There we go. Okay, Professor, can you see those questions? It's probably going to be easier for you to read them and then to answer them yourself. Can you see those questions?
Yes, I can. I can see those questions. So how to avoid detraining during the period of quarantine?
Okay.
So the best way to avoid detraining is training. Absolutely. So I think during period of quarantine, there's a lot of challenges, especially during training. If you want to perform training, if you related to high performance training, sport specific training. So, but definitely you still can do a lot of exercise at home. There's a lot of exercise and also program available which you can do at home. But the most importantly, when you perform all this exercise, if for example, if you are an international, if you are an elite sports athlete, you play, for example, rugby, for example. So it has to be very specific to rugby. And if you know that, there's a certain demand, physical demand in rugby, means that there's a lot of short sprints, there's a lot of power training. So this training should address those demands. And when we talk about the period of quarantine, I believe if you really properly train, you may not have any issue. So we did our post-COVID-19 test for our players. So we have the data which indicate that some of these players are likely to be more fitter at post-COVID-19 compared to the pre-season stage, which is good. If even you look at Cristiano Ronaldo fitness assessment after post-COVID-19, it is getting better. But the most importantly, how you make sure that if you are a coach, you should monitor them. Then you may have the result. If you've been training alone at home but without any proper monitoring, then you may have some problem getting the level of fitness. Okay, you talk about guidelines for resuming HIIT training after reopening the gym. So the guidelines, if you look at the NSCA guidelines, once the reopening of the gyms, I think you might start 50% of the total volume. And it also states that the recovery rate, there's a work rest ratio, 1:4 work rest ratio during the first week. The second week, we can start out with 70%, the third week with 80%, and perhaps during the fifth week, you can start off with the normal intensity that you likely to do during the pre-COVID-19 pandemic. So that would be my recommendation for guideline for resuming HIIT training after reopening the gyms. And also remember that, once the gym is open, so make sure the gym address all the standard operation procedures during operation. What you don't want is you come up to the gym, nobody's taking your temperatures, they don't clean and wipe the gym. If that really happened, I would recommend you to just go out from that gym, and because it is not properly performing the standard operation procedure. So you're going to get risk to get the infection. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So it sounds to me like we've got between a 6 to 7 week process or build up before we actually go back to participation. Is that about correct, roughly?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Dr. Chekarajan, is there a poll?
Yes. This is the question.
Excellent.
How frequently we need the COVID testing for the athletes once they are back into the sports and competition? Is it weekly? Is that question? So how many of you feel that a weekly testing of COVID is needed? Recently, we have known that the #1 tennis player in the world, he conducted an event and many people turned out positive. So it's a raging question maybe now. So a few people already have answered, and let's wait for a couple of seconds more before we publish the result of the poll.
We should have another one more. Not sure.
Okay, so let's end the poll, and here are the results. And
yes, oh no.
Dr. Firad, what's your opinion about this?
My opinion, weekly testing, we don't do it every week. Definitely no, especially if those kind of testing involves neuromuscular fatigue, also maximal exertion. But if you want to do like a weekly testing, for example, you do the hand grip test, for example, just once a week, the hand grip, flexibility, then it should be okay. But we don't really do it every weekly. Normally, if you're gonna do fitness test, we do it during the preseason. We do it twice, during the early stage and before the league start, and then we do it at mid-season and at the end of the season, and that's it. Only 4 times max. And even if they got injured and they're coming back for return to play, so that is where we do another set of tests. But performing weekly tests, I'm not sure whether it is possible. I know some clubs did it, but they have like this isometric, like hip adduction test, hand grip test.
Professor Fred, this question is about the COVID testing, the blood test or the...
Oh, the COVID-19 test. Okay. So it's good to have. It's good to have. I did it in the past. I did it once before the league start, and it's not that hard. I think I have a very big nose, so it's easy for it to come and go. But I'm sure if you talk about reducing the risk, I think that would be the way. That would definitely be the way. Okay. I think the English Premier League, before they start the league, they have to do more than once a week. So but now I think once a week should be, but it costs a lot of money.
And the man hours and the intensity of the work and the risk to the testers. So I think no final word has been said on all these sensitive topics. So that's it from me. I'll come back with the poll for the next session. Thank you.
Hey.
Great. Thank you very much. So that allows me to introduce the third speaker of the afternoon, Mr. Mohammed Zalkarnain, if that's the correct way to pronounce it. He holds a bachelor degree in sports science from the University of Technology in Malaysia and a Master of Education in sports science. He's a lecturer at the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, and he's based at the Seremban campus in Negeri in Sembilan. He's performed as an athlete in the martial arts and is now used as a consultant and as a coaching and development professional for Pencak Silat, which is a form of martial art. And I would like you to explain that to us, please, before you start, because I'm very interested in that. He's been a member of the Malaysian Strength and Conditioning Association and the Society of Health and Physical Educators Malaysia since he started his career as an educator. His research interests stem around strength, fitness coaching, and training performance. So we look forward to your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. So let me share my slides. Can you see my slides?
It's coming. Hold on a sec.
Yes.
Yes, there it is.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to the organizer itself. All right, to give me an opportunity to present something today, for sharing something. Okay, and I would like to take this opportunity as well for the participants, okay, for the viewers for this session as well. Okay, so my topic today is optimizing effective training for high performance sports. Okay, Mr. Andrew already presented about this topic as well. Okay, but mostly on the cognitive side, association phase, and also the automatic phase. Okay, and Dr. Raja Fihar also has presented about the effective training also, but most of them talking about most of the slide are talking about the team sport. Okay, for my base, let me introduce about myself a little bit. Okay, most of the time, okay, I was involved in what we call it pencak silat, Mr. Andrew. Okay, you can call it silat. Okay, silat competition. Silat competition is one part of martial arts. Okay, it is the same group. It's a kind of combat sport. Same kind of taekwondo, karate, and judo as well. Okay, so but these pencak silats are actually one type of just martial art. Okay, you also can consider one group with the mixed martial art as well. Okay, they also have their own rules and regulation. For this pencak silat, they will play about 3 rounds. Okay, and each round 2 minutes, and they have one interval rest, which is 1 minute, and then they proceed to the second round, and then they proceed to the third round. So which player have higher points, okay, within the game, okay, they will crown as the champion for that match. Okay, all right. So it's the same things. It's a similar characteristics, just like other combat sport. Okay, silat also having a punching. They have a kicking, punching, which is represent 1 point. Okay, kicking 2 point, and they have topping. They have scissor and other special technique as well. Okay, in pencak silat, they have 2 main categories, which is more subjective movement. There, the first one is we call it silat seni. Okay, the players or in sport we call it persilat. Okay, the contestant we call it persilat. In silat seni category, the persilat will perform a 3 minutes movement, which is involve very speed and powerful movement for within the 3 minutes. And then we have the contact event, which is the category for, we call it silat olahraga. This olahraga involve 2 players, two contestants, which is they will fighting against each other, and then the one whichever having the highest point, it will be crowned. They will be crowned the champion. All right. So my experience in silat have been about 10 years until now, and during 2016 I took over for Pencak Silat Negeri Sembilan. Negeri Sembilan is in Malaysia, is one state of within the 14 states, okay, in Malaysia. So this Negeri Sembilan, I lead for National Championship 2016, and for these players, okay, he is now representing Malaysia, and this is one of the best players that I have trained until now. Okay, but now he's represent player and he is currently with the national team. Okay, the best thing is I started to polish him from 2014, 2016, 2018, and continuously helping him in training. And then and this is the result. Okay, World Championship. He involved in World Championship 2018 and he got bronze during the first competition, his first international competition. And then for the Belgium Open, he got gold, and then the roughly one of the biggest championship, which is the Asian Championship 2019 in China, and he got bronze as well. Okay, this is my particularly experience in terms of martial art sport. Okay, all right. So when we talk about high performance sports, okay, for this time I would like to present much more general about the how we can approach to train in terms of the high performance sport itself. Okay, what is the high performance? Okay, performance can be defined as accomplishment of the goals by meeting the needs and exceed the predefined standards. Okay, by the Protocol 2017, it means that whenever we train someone, especially athlete, if we are the coaches, okay, so I would like you to imagine that I expect some of you might be coaching staff, might be of the player also. Some of you might be the physical trainer for a certain team. Okay, for my slide, I will focus more on individual sport. Okay. exceed the predefined standard. Okay, whenever athletes are performing, which is you have setting a benchmark. Okay, you have set a benchmark, then they are performing more than higher than you are for the setting benchmark, means that they are increase their performance. Okay, in another definition, development of the specific skills and abilities to adapt to an expected environmental influence and the continuous and reliable delivery of the skill and abilities in competitive situation by Kelman and Beckman 2018. Okay, means that we train with the specific skills and the abilities to adapt with the intensity of the training has been improved. Okay, that's what we mean by the performance. Then we can see is it our players or our athletes okay have been improved or not by we can see the improvement from maybe we can set up as based on your report, your graph, okay, maybe some sort of video analysis and maybe some descriptive data from your training itself. Okay, however, this performance it might be affected okay by a few factors as well. Okay, not all the times what we have planned according what we have planned and we train according to our actual plan. Okay, sometimes we have to take into consideration as well okay what are the physical differences in terms of your athletes, our athletes, okay, the psychological effect in terms of the motivation, the mood of the athlete, okay, how their involvement for that particular day's training. Okay, and one part of element that I take it seriously also, okay, the recovery part, which is the recovery can be a major factor as well. If we train so hard, but then we as a coach, or we can assume that we as an athlete, we don't have enough recovery or we don't have a proper recovery technique, recovery session, it will also impact to our performance as well. Okay, because why we just like Dr. Fihad presented before this, okay, they train about almost every day, only one off sessions after the actual match. Okay, but every single day they will continue their training. Okay, so for this particular part, recovery is very important because for me as well, okay, I also train them every single day before they compete with the actual competition. Okay, all right. So the recovery is very important. Okay, all right. So they have to take enough nutrition, okay, enough, and they have to drink enough fluids, okay, to just recover from the fatigue. And management, okay, management it came in this part we are talking about the higher management, okay, which is we are the coaching staff and above of us we have another management that control the team. Okay, so we also must have a good rapport with them, and then this management also referring to how you manage your team. Okay, all right. So next, okay, when talking about the performance as well, okay, the first thing as a coach or as a trainer or even for the athlete, okay, we have to analyze the sport itself. Okay, what are the main movement technique for that sport? So you have to determine, okay, what are the major movement. Example in basketball, it involves dribbling the ball, it involves jumping, blocking, and okay, any other extra movement, example, the bonus movement like you are dunking, okay, you are dunking and then you are doing maybe lay up, just a bonus movement, but then you have to make sure you know about the movement as well. Okay, and then what are the most common injuries occur? For martial art, for combat sport, most injury occurs quite heavy injuries, such as they can have concussion, okay, during the topping from the opponent, and then the ACL, acute cruciate ligament as well. Okay, so as a trainer and as a coach, we have to plan a training program that we can enhance okay the strength of the joint, the strength of the muscle for that particular area. Okay, means in basketball maybe most of the time they have a knee injury, so we have to improve neuromuscular training for the lower body part. All right, and then determine the physiological demand of the sport. So we have to know what kind of energy system involved for that particular sport. Okay, is it aerobic system? Is it maybe focusing more on anaerobic system? So we have to determine, because why every single training, the adaptation is based on what are the physiological demand that you set up for the team. All right, and then for me, as one part of the important element as well is determine the suitable test. Okay, what does it mean is for your sport, okay, for every sport, they have their different physiological demand and different objective, different kind of movement pattern. So this test should be exactly determined and testing what are specific to your sport. As martial art, mostly most of the time, the test that I'm using is from head rated fitness, okay, the HRF, and also the skill rated fitness, because martial art involve all of the fitness component. So we have to determine what are the proper and the right test that we want to testing for our athlete. Next, after we have analyzed the sport itself, then we have to set up the objective of the training. Okay, so we have to go through the objective. What are the main objective that we involve in the training? Okay, the first one, we have the multilateral physical development. I will go through one by one after this. Okay, sport specific physical development, and then we go narrow down, which is go to technical skills and tactical ability as well. So the other part, we have a psychological factors and also the health maintenance, injury resistant, and theoretical knowledge. All right. The first one is multilateral physical. What are the things as an athlete or as a coach have to develop first? In objective, in terms of multilateral physical development, we have to develop the basic biomotor abilities for that sport. Okay, means that endurance, strength, speed, agility, and coordination. These are one part of the component fitness in terms of training. Okay, if you are playing a sport that involve mostly lower body part, so you need to train upper body part as well. Okay, this is what we call a balance. Okay, the asymmetrical upper body, lower body, right and left. Okay, so we have to develop at the early phase of the training, we have to develop most of it. Upper body training, lower body training. Then after that, the next objective training, we're going to specify, okay, specific the physical development. All right, specific needs to be the sport of blending of key aspect performance, example speed, strength, endurance, okay, depending on the sport. In martial art, pencak silat especially, okay, mostly it involves with speed, power. Okay, we have to strength power. Okay, we have to knock down the opponents. All right. The third one is the technical skill and tactical abilities. Okay, if in other way, if we have a fitness, but then the technique of the player is quite troublesome. So as a coach and as a physical trainer, we need to polish them, okay, to improve their technique first. Technique comes first before the tactical. Okay, because why? If you set up a very good tactical, but then your player are not be able to perform with a good and proper technique, it also cannot be performed very well. All right. The fifth one, okay, the psychological factors to ensure the optimization of the physical performance. What I did for my team is that after finish the sessions every single day, I will go for a pep talk, a very brief and short pep talk before the training session start and also after the training session start. This is just to keep on assuring that their motivation are still on the par. Okay, means that I have to set up their focus every single night, because for this competition, the national competition, is most of the player is under 21 years old. So means that they are still teenagers and they are still youth. Okay, they need to be more disciplined by the coaches, and they need to be focused all the time, and they are easy to lose focus as well. So as a coach, I have to always keep on reminds them, okay, what are things that you should do, you shouldn't do. Okay, after training, just go rest. Okay, having a nice shower and then take a good rest. All right, so health maintenance, also the overall health of the athlete can be maintained by the periodic medical examination and appropriate scheduling of the training. This one is involved in periodizations. Dr. Firhat and Mr. Andrew also have talked about this one. Okay, after a period of time, you can I'm always seeking doctor advice, and I'm always asking my athlete, okay, how do you feel today? Okay, for this month, okay, how do you feel about this prolonged training? All right, if then I will look into their comments. So what are the comments, what are the feedbacks I getting from them, then I will change the training plan based on their comments as well. But don't forget that we still have the actual plan, which is the actual periodization that we have to follow. That so we need just to adjust a little bit based on the comment as well. All right, and number 7 and 8, injury resistance and the theoretical knowledge. This why we train for injury resistance. Okay, that's why we try to reduce, okay, the chances to get injuries for any kind, because the injuries we cannot predict when and where the injuries will come. So we have to having a good maybe physical training, okay, especially for the strength training part, okay, just to reduce the chances to get more serious injuries. Okay, and the last one is the theoretical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge is the training should increase the knowledge of the physiological and psychological basis of training, planning, nutrition, and regeneration. This part is I'm always educate my athlete, because for me, in my personal opinion, I would like to have an athlete who does not only receive command or receive information or receive comment from the coaches only, but they need to have a good and rational thinking. Okay, because why? I like to train them. I like to train my athlete to become as a athlete that can make a decision making in combat sport, in martial art, in my particular sport, pencak silat. I would like them to have very fast decision making during the intense competition. Okay, next, this slide represent the performance during match. This one is I adopt from browser. Okay, this performance during match, it relates with the athletic and the physical ability. Sorry for the typing error. Okay, also the basic attributes, the constitution. This is also the one of the factors that affecting training as well. Okay, talent of the athletes, the health of the athlete. If you are not if they're having not enough recovery, they will not having a good 100% condition, which is the good condition, so it will affect their performance as well. All right, tactical abilities and the cognitive skill, this one has been presented by Mr. Andrew. Okay, tactical abilities also affected by the psychological and social factors, motivation of the athlete, social environment. Okay, Mr. Andrew have also has touched on part which is the schooling. Okay, I will touch on that part later on, because there will some certain circumstances which is we dealing with the athlete, we dealing with their school, and we dealing with their parents. That is a very big major for every coaches who involved in this kind of competition. All right, if we are training the youth athlete. Okay, in terms of the technique part, okay, the coordination and also the motor skill of the athlete, we need to polish them. Okay, because it will affect all the performance during the match. And of course, most of the team sport and also most of the single sport which is involve power and speed. Okay, we need to develop their very good physical conditioning. Okay, strength, speed, endurance supplements as well, which is we supply. We have enough nutrition. Okay, just to add on, just a top up. Okay, top up element with after the training. All right. So we have talked about the objective, then the time that we have to prepare for the training itself. Okay, type of session. Is it we are focusing on technique, or is it we are focusing on tactical? Okay, this one is also play a role for the coaches and athlete as well. Okay, if you the coaches, you have to determine, okay, for today what kind of training that you have to focus. Is it technique part or the tactical part? Okay, is it the conditioning part or is it the skill part? So the second one is the organization and preparation of the facilities as well. Okay, even so you have planned a very good training program, but then you don't have the equipment. So what should you do? What are the second plan? What are the plan B? What are the plan C? Okay, so you have to have a few backup plan, because as for me, I'm conducting a team which is one part of the silat. Okay, which is Negeri Sembilan is one part of the state, which is we don't have enough high end or high technologies in terms of equipment. So most of the time, conditioning part, we are using body weight, we are using the gym as well, but then very limited equipment. So I have to have to go for another training. But if you want to say that, if you want to have the 100% exactly effect from the gym, so I might say I don't get the 100%. Okay, so because I have to change using, if I want to performing the upper body exercises, we have to go for the bench press, chest press machine and all that, but then we don't have that kind of equipment. So I change it into body part using resistant band, using a tire sometimes. Okay, and selection of the training method. Okay, for that day, you want to focus on cardio or you want to focus on the strength. Okay, try to have a different days in part for the training plan. Adapting the session to meet the individual demand. Okay, so after you train, so let's see what are the progression of the athletes. Okay, each of the athletes, they have their different objective that you have to set up. Okay, example, athlete A, they have they lack in terms of speed. So for that kind of athlete, for that particular athlete, we need to develop their speed training. Okay, extra more than the others. And second person, maybe the lack of strength. So we need to focusing on their strength and so on. Okay, the choice of the material and equipment. This one I said before this. Okay, if we don't have what the equipment that we want to use, then we have to plan, set a backup plan. So we have to use another equipment as well. Okay, that giving not 100% the same result, but then at least we have something. All right, assessment and monitoring of what has been achieved. Okay, this is also reflect with the analyze with the sport itself. The first slide I'm talking about. Okay, after we train, okay, we should go for the pre and post testing. Because why? Benchmark. Okay, how come that, or how do you want to know that your athlete has been improved or not if you don't have a testing periodically? Okay, so as for me, I'm always go for 3-month testing. Okay, the first in January, and second one on March, the third one on June, and fourth one and the fifth one another 3 months as well. Okay, so I can monitor their progress, okay, within the 3 months. Okay, what if anything happen and they don't get what are the best result that I want for each of them? So at least, okay, within the 3 months before they come in for the next testing day, okay, so we have time to adjust, right? Maybe the training intensity, or maybe the training program. Okay, developing the active capacity and customizing the warm up and cool down session. This one is as a coach, you can adjust it based on the athlete, the type of warm up you can use for active or dynamic stretching, static or dynamic as well. Okay, balance training, you can improvise, okay, put into your warm up session. Okay, because why? Balance variable is somehow we also always neglect about improving our balance, but we do know that balance muscle, example the core muscle, okay, it is the link between the upper body and the lower body part. So when we having a much more strong core, so we can perform the movement better. Okay, so we can put a balance stretching or balance activity during the warming up and cool down session as well. So the corrective exercises means as a coach, you can sometimes observe your athlete. Okay, observe the athlete. Okay, is it they having some, what we call it, movement that not proper. Okay, not proper performed by them. And most of the time, sometimes we are referring to athlete who are injured and just come back to the training. So we have to correcting their movement as well. Okay, adding game is one part of element that we can try. Okay, in this is just a variation of the activity, so you can try to playing a game during the warm-up session, and sometimes during the weekend. Okay, when I'm finishing my training session, I always put in some maybe 15 minutes to half an hour, 15 minutes, just a mini game between them. All right, just to keep on their momentum. But then each of the mini game, I will put some objective as well. It means that just to make sure they're having a fun, they're having a fun, but then still focusing on improving themselves. Okay, and then using a strength platform for power and speed training. Okay, most of the sport for team sport, intermittent sport especially, involved in power and speed. So we need to train for strength and training. Because why? Because it will reduce the injuries. Okay, that's why that are the main purpose we training. Okay, and some of the coaches, maybe some of the sport background, they are not involved in speed and power training, but then they are not doing the strength training part. But in as for me individually, I would suggest you maybe early phase of training, just a basic physical development can enhance the later on upper sport performance of the athletes. Okay, because it really increase the performance as well. So to ensure the good strength training, okay, so make sure no strength training without a proper warm up. Okay, means that it will not consider a good training if you're not having a proper warm up before the strength training. Develop both agonist and antagonist muscle. Recently research also, okay, focusing on antagonist muscle can be improved the movement as well, or the performance as well, not just focusing on agonist muscle. Example, if you are doing back squat for improving your quadricep, okay, for some research focusing on improving the hamstring exercises. Okay, then means that when we have a proper strength training for the antagonist muscle, it will also helping the agonist and the whole muscle movement improve for that particular area. Okay, implement stretching after workout and exercise. This is also one part of the as for me, it's compulsory compulsory things that we have to do as an athlete or as a coaches as well. Always remind the athlete, okay, to do a good stretching. Assess and adjust the program time to time is what I said. Assess and adjust program for particular strength training as well. So we have to assess them periodically, and then we have to adjust the program time to time. Okay, and this one is the balancing between the coach and the players. Okay, coach should be a good communicator, winner, positive educator. And if we have a player which is much more confident and motivated players and very cooperative with the team, if the player is from the team sport and determination for winning the game and well-adjusted person, so with this both good combination, it will increase the performance as well. Okay, and this thing is maybe sometimes for individual sport, we can use, I personally use the democratic style, but in a way which is the athlete are quite disciplined and they listen to me. Okay, but most of the time I will ask them and discuss with them first. Okay, all right. So, but team sport, there are certain times you can use the democratic style, and certain times you can go for the autocratic style. Okay, and social and environment related factors. This one is the for if you are training the team sport, team spirit, individual motivation, sense of belonging to the teams. Okay, and cooperation within each other is very important. This one is part of, and this one also the social environment related factors also affecting the performance. Okay, parent, school, player relationship. You have a good player, you have a good athlete, but then their parents is not encouraging them to further their sport development. So it could be a troublesome for you as well. Okay, so sometimes we have to discuss very having a very good discussion with the parents. Okay, and sometimes also as well when the parents is okay, when we have passed the barriers with the parents, but later on, okay, the school or the higher upper management having some problem with, we cannot agree in some decision, that is quite troublesome as well. Okay, so as a coach, as a trainer, and as an athlete as well, so we need to combine. That's why this is a very important slide, which is this player is well adjusted, and if the player is having a very good determination, they will find a way to overcome that problem. Okay, leisure activities, cultural and social life also affecting. Okay, in Malaysia, and most the players also having their own religion, and then for Muslims especially, okay, when there are certain time they have to stop a while and go for training, go for praying. I'm sorry, go for praying. And if let's say I do have a coach which is taekwondo coach. Okay, taekwondo and karate, they are from Indian, they are Indian religion, Indian. Okay, but then they also have a Muslim player, a Muslim athlete in their team. Okay, but whenever azan or praying time, they will stop a little bit and then giving a chance for the Muslim player, for Muslim athlete to go for pray. Okay, this is some things that maybe the coach, the physical trainer, and also mostly the coach staff have to take into consideration as well. Okay, and I think the last slide for me for today is the key point for today. We can identify the key component involved for that particular sport. So as a coach, we have to know what are the most demanding variable for our sport itself. Okay, bridging the gap between the coach and the athlete. This is what I just presented before this. Okay, we have as a coach, we also must know about the condition of an athlete, and we have to know how to tackle our athlete. Means that how to understanding between each other. Okay, having a proper training plan, it gives you higher chances to be the winner for a certain match, for a few match, or maybe for your what you're targeting match. Okay, from a very good and proper training plan, and good observation and monitoring time to time basis also will help you in terms of your progression of your athlete, and you can monitor the development of the training itself. I think that's all for me. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Tiaga.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely presentation. So, Dr. Janani, do you have Questions to be projected to Doc?
Okay, important training component to reduce fatigue. Okay, important. Can I read the question by myself? Is it? I have to read by myself, right? So important training component to reduce fatigue. Okay,
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Okay, so the component to reduce fatigue is actually by having a proper monitoring intensity, because Mr. Andrew and also Dr. Fihad also said about the intensity is important above on top anything else. So the component to reduce fatigue is you to monitor and induce the training volume, and you have to observe of your player as well, or your athlete as well. Okay, that's why we have the RPE, we have the Andrew has presented before this, the heart rate monitoring, which is the external load that we can monitor them. Okay, from that part we can reduce the chances to have maybe excess fatigue, which is it can leads to injuries as well. Okay, and the best is you have to monitor the training day, the training load. Okay, if the Dr. Raja Fihad are using the wellness score. Okay, so wellness score, so because why I'm saying this, okay, this component is the physical assessment or physical training, the training itself, we have to monitor. When you train at the right intensity, okay, the excessive fatigue, we can reduce it into the lowest amount. Okay, when can asymptomatic player infected with COVID-19 allowed to return to training and the competition? Okay, I never had experience with this situation before, and personally, I don't have what we call it a solid answer for this question, because maybe Mr. Andrew can help me on this. But as for me or Dr. Raja Fihad also can, because I don't have any experience with this kind of situation. And in Malaysia, in my country, I think after the patient has passed all the quarantine time from the hospital, and then maybe 14, and the hospital declare that you can involve in going back to the training. So I think there is no problem as long you have the permission from the hospital and you are cleared from the infection. Okay, I think this is my opinion.
Yeah, I think again in South Africa it might be. I think each country has their own regulations, but I know in South Africa you can return after 14 days if you're asymptomatic. I know with the IPL protocol, those players have to have 3 tests. They have to be clear on 3 different tests scheduled, I think 3 to 4 days apart. Okay. If they do get COVID, that's how they're going to run it. So I think it's very individual to the region that you're in and also the sporting event. So I think
it depends on the country itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you, Doctor.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for a very enlightening talk. Dr. Tiakarajan, do we have a poll?
Yes, we do have one. A lot of controversial questions. And this is, I think,
we love controversial questions.
Yeah. And this is the question. Talking about high performance sports and doping seems to be very rampant there. Can we eradicate doping in high performance sports completely? Is it practical? Yes or no? So let's wait for people to respond.
This is not, I'm not able to click my response here on my poll.
Okay, we may reserve to you to give the judgment, you to give the judgment.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I also can do the polling as well.
Yes, you can do.
Oh, okay.
Because we are host, we can't do that.
Okay, I'll remove as host, so then you can do.
Oh my.
So can you please try now?
I actually lost the poll, Dr. But I will wait for the result.
Gone totally now.
I'll relaunch it. Can you see now?
Okay, yep.
This seems to be a tough fight.
Yeah. Who's the third one? Faster. Okay.
Okay.
It's a
So
tie.
let's end the poll and publish
Show
the
us
results. Yeah. So this is the result, neck to neck.
Wow.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
So doping and high performance sports. Andrew, please share your thoughts on this. How we can try to eradicate.
Well, I think it should be easy to eradicate, but it isn't. So maybe that's the 50-50. That's why we're getting to sit on the fence here. I think doping in high intensity sports or in any sport, high performance sport, I don't think we'll ever eradicate it. But I think it should be an easy thing for us to eradicate, but yet we struggle. And I think part of that is we love to see these amazing events and these amazing feats that athletes around the world are able to do. And I think part of that, we've got used to that, those individuals and those teams potentially being doped. So I think we get used to seeing these fantastic events, and we're just a little bit nervous of what it'll look like when we don't have that. And everything will sort of be a little bit slower, not as strong, etc., etc.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Other panelists and speakers would like to have your opinion on this also. A few words on.
As for me, the doping issue is very subjective issue, which is for combat sport, particularly for combat sport. Some of the athletes took the drugs because why? Because they are afraid they are not having enough strength, enough speed to compete with their opponents. So when this kind of anxiety or worried, okay, interfere in their thinking, okay, they started to taking the negative thing, the negative drug and whatsoever. So as for me, as a coach, we can always monitor and advise them, right? So that's why the important thing is after training, so we always to remind what are the positive, negative things that you have to do, the good thing and the bad things you don't have to do. So at least the reminder from us as a coach or as a physical trainers as well, okay, can reduce them, okay, the athlete, particularly the athlete, because this combat sport mostly involved with the weighting scale problem. All right, so most of them having this kind of problem and they take drugs, okay, just to reduce. And sometimes in some certain cases, they take drugs that they even know they didn't even know that that kind of drug is considered is one part of negative drug that they can take. So a knowledge, a good education and good reminder from a coach, I think it might help the athlete as well. That's
Thank
my
you so
opinion.
much. So it's a very large topic. So maybe we may have to have separate series of webinars on doping in sports. Maybe when the Malaysian Association conducts it, they can have entire day for it. So right now, let's welcome the President of the Indian Association of Sports Medicine, Professor Armugam, to the webinar for his concluding remarks. Sir.
Yes, good afternoon to all. So it is my privilege and pleasure to host you all for the series of these webinars on sports sciences, which was extremely successful thanks to the enthusiastic partnership and hard work put in by our collaborator, Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine, as well as Asian Federation of Sports Medicine. And I think we had very important topics are covered with didactic lectures and very good interactions. And the difficult period, we were able to go through some crucial topics of the for the sports. And soon, hopefully, we get onto the field, and things are slowly opening up. As you know, the football matches are back in action in England, as well as cricket. And our own India, the IPL matches are going to start. Also, various state government has relaxed. So whatever we relax the sporting activities in each state. So whatever we learned during this pandemic, we hope to practice it soon. and very soon we'll come up with more interesting program in near future. Once again, I thank all the participants without whom this will not be a success, and thanks all.
Thank you, sir. And Professor Mahin, do you have any concluding words on behalf of Malaysian Association?
Definitely, Prof. I must thank the Indian Association of Sport Medicine and the ASEAN Federation of Sport Medicine, who works together, and definitely the Center of Sports Science, the Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education and Research, for an excellent organizing. Thanks to Prof. Aru and Dr. Tiaga for excellent work. On behalf of the Malaysian Association of Sport Medicine, I think yesterday Dr. Halim has expressed his thanks and gratitude to all the organizing committee. I must say that the team behind the screen, there's so many of them. I think we thank all of you, each and of you. On behalf of the faculty of Sports Science and Recreation of University Technology Mara, also thank all the speakers. We had 8 days, 31 lectures from 12 countries. And I think we have done a very good job. And as what Prof. Arumugam mentioned about it, it's a really a conference by itself. Though it is split it up by weekly, but it is a conference by itself. It's a congress, I would say, that very nicely done for all of us, for the sports people and sports science people, coaches, practitioners, athletes, and everything. I guess everybody have learned a lot of things from this presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We will definitely, Malaysian Association of Sport Medicine and the Faculty of Sports Science and University Technology Mara definitely will work together, and we'll have another webinar in such a way. It's a benchmark that you have prepared, so we have to follow. Nicely. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
Sorry, there we go. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for the day, and to the presenters for their wonderful presentations today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, Priha.